So why are we talking about enoughness? For two reasons. A very practical, utilitarian reason, and then a very spiritual reason as well. Practically, we are in a new age. There are too many of us consuming too much of what is quickly becoming too little, right? We have needs, and we have appetites, and we have excess, and we have waste, and we are consuming too much and throwing too much away. And it's not always out of greed, and it's not always out of meanness. It is mostly, I would think, out of a sense of innocence and ignorance and just not paying attention. I mean, yesterday I went out to take my recycling to the curb, a very righteous exercise that we all go through, very spiritual exercise. And before I went out, as I was preparing to go out, I had to decide which boots to put on. Do I put on my black boots or do I put on my brown boots? And as I'm making this decision, I'm going, there's something radically wrong with this picture. Here I am trying to save the world by recycling things that I shouldn't perhaps have bought in the first place, but couldn't avoid buying in some cases as well, taking them out to be recycled, and I am living in a house of excess by my personal choice and my personal decisions. So there are things that we do which we're not even aware of. There are personal choices that we make that we're not even aware of. And as I'm sitting there, I'm saying, you know what, also, I get calls all the time about, can I provide some of my leftovers, my excess for the Vietnam vets or for some other groups that come in. Shamefully, I often say, oh, that's all right. I already cleared out my closet last month. Well, I might have cleaned out my closet last month, but you know what? I can still clean out more of my closet this month because there are others. While I have excess, there are others who do not have enough. So how do we balance excess with need? How do we balance appetite with our desire to give? How do we do that? We live as a 7 billion population, many of us, in an age when there are too many consuming too much of what is quickly becoming too little. E.O. Wilson said that humans, for the first time in history, are a geophysical force. We have powers to change the earth. Not just powers to ruin this soil or to foul this stream, but the very climate, the very institutions, the very systems that we all rely on to live. When we're that powerful, and we have hubris and ego that goes with that sense of power, we have to be very careful how we exercise our power. We need to be both humble and respectful of the power that we have. Herman Daly, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you got to read the Daly excerpts. They're amazing because here you have a former World Bank economist speaking in a language of faith that is tremendously moving. So Herman Daly says, growth should not be the central organizing principle of our time. He says life is based on limits. And despite the sort of economic discipline, which assumes that there can be endless growth, that if we run out of something here, the marketplace will allow us to find substitutes there, that is a chimera, that is a dream, that is just a falsehood. There's no such thing as limitless growth. And we have to begin to speak as if we understand that. We have to begin to build our economy, our homes, our consumption, our systems, as if we understand that, because we must. And unfortunately, if you look in the business sections, if you listen to the political, banter, no one wants to say there are limits. No one wants to say enough. No one wants to say we have to do things differently. And it seems to me that there is one community that can do that. Government is not easily going to be able to do that. Our candidates are not easily going to be able to do that. Science can do that, but nobody really listens to them on the popular level. The marketplace is certainly not going to do that. The business section is not going to do this. There's one sector of society that has respect that can do that. And that's the religious sector. We're the ones who can say we must live within limits, and we can say that for another reason, not just because we have sort of the prophetic voice that we need to reclaim. We can say this because we have a secret weapon, as it were. We know that living within limits can be spiritually uplifting. right? We know that pursuing the endless more is the formula for dissatisfaction. If I need more, what I have today is never enough. If what I have today is never enough, I will never be satisfied. This sense of endless pursuit, of endless appetite, of endlessly wanting more is a formula for spiritual disaster. It says we will never be happy. That the way to be happy is to understand that there are limits. And that within these limits we can find contentment. And we can find surety. Right? And we can find pleasure. Because once you get to where you're going, you say, I've arrived. If you're on an endless trip, you'll never get there. So spirituality is also benefited by understanding the sense of limits. So our task today is to understand, as human beings, what is our task in this world? What has God put us here for? What do we think about our place here? What is our task? And what should be our attitude toward achieving that task? So I turn to you. I don't know if you have, do you have the handouts, the readings that we gave? Great. So I want to turn first to Genesis 1. What is our task? It says, and we're talking about the first story of creation, the sixth day of creation, when God has finished creating everything, including the humans. And God says to the humans, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. And to all the beasts of the earth, and all the birds of the air, and all the creatures that move on the ground, everything that has the breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food. And it was so. So first we see that God incorporates all of the animate creatures in God's blessings. God cares for all. We are all part of God's, complex and integrated woven blanket of creation. But there's a distinction here between what God gives to the human being and what God gives to the animals. And I will tell you that not even some of the best commentators of the Hebrew Bible, some of the best rabbinic commentators, picked this up. Some did, but surprisingly not all of them did. And I didn't pick this up until very, very recently. But I bolded the distinction so that you could pick it up pretty easily, right? That is, I think, do you have it in bolding? No? Oh, okay. So what's the distinction between what the humans and what the animals were given? Seed bearing. So what do we do with that?
And fruit.
Right, seed and fruit.
Seed in it, yeah.
The humans were given the seed bearing plants, and the animals were given the grasses. What do we learn? What can we learn from that? What does that tell us? How does it help us understand our task? We cultivate. Say more.
Well, we have seeds and we can cultivate things that we need, choose to eat.
So there's one, right. When I first started in the environmental field, I was taught by someone who was in the leave no trace arena. And you go into the forest and you go in your treks and you don't leave any traces. And I thought at first that was a fabulous way to imagine being on the earth. And then, hang on one second. And then as I got more sophisticated about it, that is wrong. There is no human, there's no animal, there's no life that can leave no trace on this earth. Our task is not to leave no trace. Our task is, in fact, to utilize the best and the bounty and the blessings of this earth for our dignity and our survival and our thriving. But what's our challenge? To do it in such a way that it provides sustainability, that we return the seed that we were blessed with, we return the seed to the earth and to the culture so that it also can grow. So yes, we're allowed here and we're charged in some sense to cultivate, not just forage, but to build society, civilization, agriculture that cultivates food and growth. Yes?
First of all, grasses are seed bearing.
Yes.
They're pollinated.
Yes.
And corn is a grass.
Yes.
And so that's not
yes.
box things quite
yes.
that way. Okay, that's all.
Yes, you're absolutely right. This is, if there were botanists here, they would say, okay, this is probably not, a way that one would divide these two. But from the early the early scientists, where you could see seeds and fruit that you hold in your hand, and the green grasses that the animals would forage and graze don't look the same as those with cherries and plums and apples. I think that's what the biblical authors were getting at. Exactly. Yes.
I think it also speaks to the need for humans to be land preservationists. You know, if animals need the grasses, they need grass, they need land.
Right. So first of all, don't use all of your seed-bearing agriculture and push out the grazing, rights of the animals, right? There has to be a sharing there. Is that sort of what you were, yes?
And from my reading of it, it's not the animals were given grasses. The animals were given every green plant for food. The humans were more limited.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very interesting. Which we know is the case because the birds are going to be eating the seeds, right?
And eating the berries, they're going to be eating the fruit.
Right. But what the animals, how do you see the difference then?
I see that as, the animals have more priority than we do in terms of how much they have.
Uh-huh.
And we need to bear that in mind, that they also have this need, and we need to actually, when we plant, we need to, instead of trying to consider them pests and get them away and prevent them, we need to share. Right,
there needs to be a sharing. But there is, while on the one hand the animals might have a broader, what's the word I'm looking for? Smorgasbord, of food to choose from, we have, as it were, a higher level of understanding of managing the food that we
requires us to be more responsible than they are.
Correct. Dominion in the Bible does not mean harsh-handed ruling. Dominion in the Bible means a higher consciousness of responsibility.
Yeah,
stewardship, exactly.
And also differentiation. That humans draw differences and they choose to do something but not to do something else.
Right. We have that choice. So that's true. The animals will eat whatever is within their realm that serves them, and we can differentiate. Exactly. And we should use everything that is in our midst. I was writing this morning, talking about blogs. I was writing this morning a blog about fruit trees in the city, orchards in the city. And one of the things we can talk later, one of the things that I was writing is that I sort of came to this awareness when I was actually at your church with all the acorns that are falling down, and at somebody else's synagogue and all these acorns falling down, and going, my God, what a waste all these acorns are. And it's like, if there were walnuts or there were chestnuts, that would be great. And I'd scoop them up and eat them. And I wondered if acorns, in fact, were food.
Yes. Of course they are.
Of course, yes, but I was never taught that, and acorns were just things that, you sort of had to not slip on when you walked over, but the fact is that there are something like 20,000, or maybe you probably know, 20,000 kinds of edible foods in the world today, and maybe 20 varieties are now used for 90% of human consumption. A waste. If we have all these seed-bearing plants available to us, let's use them all. Let's use them appropriately, right? So enoughness means appropriate distribution as well. All right, so let's go to the next text. So on the one hand, we have discernment, we have the opportunity to share, we have the obligation to be sustainable, we have the obligation to return to the earth that which we consume. I mean, that's sort of the major takeaway I want you to have here. We have to return to the earth in a fertile fashion, that which we are given to consume. That's what I see mostly in the seed-bearing gifts that we were given. But in addition, we have another take on what our task would be, and this is from the second story of creation. And the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to take care of it. And the Lord commanded the man, you are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat of it, you will surely die. Let's go back to the first sentence. The man was put and by this time, by the way, it's a man. We haven't yet gotten to Eve in the second creation story. Put the man in the Garden of Eden to work it and to take care of it. If there were a bumper sticker for the environmental movement, this would be it. that is, we are here to work the earth. Again, this is not a leave no trace existence. This is an existence that we are given where we are here to mine the earth, use the earth, improve the earth for our thriving, for our dignity, for our humanity. We couldn't be building buildings like this or sitting in a building like this if we didn't use the earth. But we have to use it in a way that preserves it, that cares for it, that allows us to be stewards of it. So it's this balance of consumption and stewardship, right? Working the earth and taking care of the earth. In Hebrew, l'avda u'l'shamra. It's the yin and the yang of working it and caring for it. That is the bumper sticker of sustainability. It's not don't touch, it's not leave wilderness out there and don't touch it. It's not consuming it endlessly as if there are no limits. It is this intimate balance of use and preservation. And we have to figure out how to use it in a cycle of preservation, right? Whatever we use, we have to figure out how to restore it to the earth in a way that it can be used yet again. That's the nature of our task. So what should our attitude be that helps us get to this task? The task is not the hard part. Correct, 5 minutes. I need about 45, but okay, 5 minutes left. The task is not, the hard part is not defining our task. And it's not really the role of religion uniquely to define the task. What religion can do mostly is help us understand how to attain the attitude to get us to the task. We are the ones who can help build the spirit to give us the will to get the task done. So let's go to the third story, the story about Chafetz Chaim. The Chafetz Chaim was a very spiritual rabbi, lived in Europe, sort of the turn of the 20th century. And he was famous enough that visitors from America would come to see him and talk to him and try to learn and get spiritual sustenance from him and uplift from him. So a visitor, evidently a wealthy visitor from America, came to see the famous Chafetz Chaim, a rabbi renowned for his piety and simplicity. And when the visitor arrived, he was surprised at what he saw. He saw a table, a chair, a bookcase, a closet, a bed, a desk. I mean, now you're talking about the Chafetz Chaim. You know, he should have a building like this, you know, all to himself, and have his, you know, his visitors come and be greeted by someone at the door and sit down in an outer chamber and then have an inner chamber and then this or the innermost chamber. You know, there should be something, some regal, ceremonial, welcoming and sort of stages that you have to go through. And the visitors just come and see this very modest living quarters, which served for the Chafetz Chaim. So the visitor says to him, "Where are all your possessions? Like, where do you really live?" And the rabbi says to the visitor coming from across the ocean, "Well, where are yours?" And the visitor says, "Well, what do you mean? I'm just a visitor. I'm here just for a short time." And the Chafetz Chaim says, "So am I." So if we could understand that we are here just for a short time, that we are visitors, that we are the recipients of the gifts of those who came before us, and that we must be those who gift to those who come after us, if we understand that we are really very modest creatures, that could potentially have a very big and devastating impact. But that in fact our joy can be found in the modesty and in the camaraderie and in spending our energies with each other, preparing to hand on this earth to the next generation. That's where our joy comes from. Then we will be able to have an attitude which says, I know how to define enough. And I know when I can be happy with enough. That's really what we can do. My time is almost up, so what I want to do is, I did not get to the Shemitah.
So I'm so pleased to be here with you. I give lots of speeches and lots of presentations all around the country and starting around the world. But I will say this is the first time I've talked to a group like you. I usually am in a room with philanthropists or investors or bankers. So this is a really unique opportunity for me. And really forced me to think about my work in a different way as I figured out how to share this information with you. So, am I not moving? No, there we go. I have lots and lots of slides, and I will say I'm trying to cram into 20 minutes what I usually do in an hour and a half. So there are going to be things in the deck that you will get afterwards that I probably won't talk about. I ask questions. I encourage you. I'm going to be asking you questions. I encourage you to ask me questions. I move around. I talk with my hands. So hopefully you can follow along. And also, if there's any concept or term that you don't understand, and I really try to make this very basic, and not use any lingo or jargon, there may be some slipping in there. So if there's something you don't get, just ask. Okay. So, who knows what impact or social or mission investing is? Has anyone heard of that concept? Okay, a number of folks. You want to tell me what it is? Anyone?
In the United Methodist Church, pastors that are part of the pension plan are given an opportunity to invest in 5 different categories of social funds, which is one of them. So things related to maintaining those values associated with what is good social principles, good civility, and and not exploiting people, things that happen.
Right.
That happen in many different places.
Right. Exactly. So it's financial investing, but incorporating non-financial factors into your decision making. How your investment impacts your community, impacts the earth, impacts your state. I mean, any way.
I want to make a comment that you probably are going to get. But one of the dynamics of looking at it within the investment portfolio is that the returns aren't that good. So you really have to make a conscious because when you're investing, you're looking for return on investment. But the social context creates an additional obligation to the investor about how this will indeed, in the greater picture, benefit the most folk. A Rousseau kind of understanding.
I will get to that, and I think that is a big, it's what a lot of people think about this industry. You can intentionally choose to take a lower return to achieve the social mission, but you can also achieve very competitive market rates of return as well. And the question then is, how do you measure and value the social aspects of that investment and incorporate that into your return calculations? Did you have a...
I was just going to encourage you to become a Lutheran because our pension plan actually is doing much better if you're in the social, we call it social purpose area. So it's doing all right.
And I think this I agree. Mine do better by being socially have a longer horizon view of what's really true wealth, but it also calls up the question of what's a return on your investment. I mean, if your return on your investment is measured in monetary terms, and meanwhile you're turning around and writing lots of checks to charities to fix the problems that those investments are creating, you might want to look a little more holistically at what you might return.
I remember sitting in a meeting with my boss, and he was talking about this new investment fund that we were going into on the market rate side. It's like, it's so great. They buy up cheap apartments and they turn them into expensive condos. And I said, well, gosh, I'm going to be making an investment in an affordable housing developer in this particular city. They're fighting exactly what is happening on the other side of the portfolio. And so how can we be aware, and how can we not be at cross purposes? Nola, you want to go first, and then Jim?
The other thing that I would say about return on investment is that, in my view, that's kind of a short-sighted thing because
financial return on investment.
Yeah, because when you look at where we are right now, there was a lot of big returns on those investments before and that's the thing. I mean, socially responsible investing over the long term, because it does not imply ravaging and raping the earth, is actually probably going to get you more.
The last three comments, Rebecca, as yours, Christa, and your thought about 5 years ago and the investment returns, points out to me that maybe we want to use a different term rather than impact, because every investment
has an impact. That's true.
Whether it's one we would consider positive or negative, the raping and pillaging negativity. So
we can call it whatever you want.
Yeah, so I was thinking we ought to expand what we're talking about, because we need to mitigate against the negative impact of investing.
Well, let's hold some questions there.
Okay. So we've talked about this, and I will say impact, social, mission, everyone kind of has a different term to call this, and there is actually no legal definition. There's only one specific kind of investing by a private foundation that is legally defined. But if you think about impact, social, mission, whatever our new name is going to be as a big umbrella, there are several different activities that you can do to incorporate non-financial aspects into your investing. It might be screening investments. You might want to, and I'm sure this is where many of the retirement funds have their capital. Perhaps it's a Calvert or Pax or some of these funds that will either screen out companies that they don't, that they don't want to support. Alcohol, tobacco, gambling, firearms, right. Or it might be screening, that's a negative screen. It might be a positive screen looking for the best kinds of companies, the companies that have the most diverse workforce or the most fair labor practices or the most environmentally sensitive in their activities. That's screening. Shareholder activism is if you own stock in a public company, you have the right to make a resolution to that company asking it to change its behavior. It might be limiting CEO pay, getting back to this limiting inequality. It might be, getting someone to stop drilling, getting a company to stop drilling in a particular region. Very, very active. I will say it's kind of tough if you're one of a small group of investors that are trying to get a really big company to change its business practices. And then there's this proactive investing, and that's really where I focus my work on. And it's a lot of folks consider this screening as more passive. You're kind of making a decision up front and then just letting it happen. You do have to be very active in the shareholder activism, but in the impact investing, on the proactive side, you have to find an investment and make that investment. It's not really easy. It's not like you go to, if you have a broker or a financial advisor, you typically can't go to them and find these opportunities. They're typically not public, that they're private and small. And so there's also a fair amount of work there, but I will say this is where the greatest amount of activity is happening in the industry right now. And then if we think about that proactive investing, and this gets back to the starting point, kind of think about it in two sectors. There is the below market rate investment, where you are intentionally accepting a lower rate of financial return with the expectations that you will be making a social return on that. But you can also make market rate investments that incorporate non-financial aspects. So a lot of folks are interested and excited about clean tech, companies that create clean energy. And I will say they have been really, really strong performers and very good financial returns, but it's still doing something positive. It's trying to, focus on sustainability and leaving our planet, not the way it was, but leaving it so that future generations can enjoy the lives that we had as well. Let's see. Okay, what did I do? Next. There we go. Am I really? Oh, did you say 5 minutes? No. Okay. I'm like, I only got through 2 slides. I think I'm going to skip this. The idea here is just that almost anything you can do on the market rate side, you can also do on the market rate side, or the below market rate. So you could do venture capital or private equity. I'm sure you guys have heard of those. You can do it on the market rate side. You could be like Mitt Romney and buy companies, and, well, who knows what Bain did with the companies that they bought. But you could also do that on the below market side, investing in a private equity or venture capital fund that invests here in the Baltimore area in companies that create jobs, but that aren't kind of Mitt jobs, that are family supporting wages with training and benefits. And also, investments can be made across all issue areas. So it could be environmental, it could be farming and ag, it could be energy, affordable housing and community development, economic development, health, you name it. I mean, I have a big chart that I didn't include here that has all those different issue areas and examples of investments that folks have done. So you really, depending on your issue area or social interests, you can make investments that meet that interest and your values. So just a little on the history, and I've been doing this for a long time, 17 years now, and I've known the history, but this is really the first time I put it down on paper to talk to you guys, and it's like, wow, I didn't really realize how much religious organizations influenced this industry. So starting in the 1700s, with the Quakers not participating in the slave trade, or the Methodists kind of avoiding sinful companies and don't harm your neighbor by your business practices. So a long history. In the 60s, U.S. economic development spurred on by the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King's work around economic development, equality for women, safe labor practices, anti-war investments. 70s and 80s, this idea of disinvesting, divesting from South Africa in protest of apartheid. Now, a lot of folks divest from the Sudan. Community development financial institutions in the 80s and the 90s, it's a U.S. phenomenon that really was started by the faith-based communities. The nuns took their pension money and gave them to community organizations and said, do something that aligns with our social values. And we won't charge you interest, which they still don't, which is pretty astonishing. And use it to build childcare centers or affordable housing or other things that benefit the communities that we're in. First socially responsible mutual fund in the 90s, and really in the 90s up to now, the focus has really been more on this proactive investing. So why? Well, there were a couple of people here who were definitely social investors. I saw that. Anyone else who's a social investor? Excellent. The rest of you need to be paying attention to your portfolio. Yes, Microplace does. Exactly. It does. I would count that. So why? Why do you do it?
Sleep at night.
I think that's a good one. Other reasons? Make sure it's ethical. So you can sleep at night.
I think also an important question to look at is why you don't do it, right? So just to be transparent, I've been thinking about this for the past couple of weeks because I just looked at my end of the year report for my mutual fund, which I never looked at before, and saw that the mutual fund invested in, I won't even say the company, X company that I did not support.
Right.
So part of it was being naive and not really checking into what you're investing in, just looking at the return.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's, when we're talking about enoughness, it's often that automatic naivety that, you kind of go with because everybody else does it.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Lack of awareness, I think, is a really big challenge that this sector faces.
Well, Nina was talking about some of the personal things that we need to do to figure out limits. But the problem with any idiosyncratic personal things I do is it doesn't have much reach. Part of the reason we go to social responsible investing is that you can hope that through the collective
Exactly.
we're going to change the companies that actually change the face of the earth.
Right, exactly.
With the global economy, it's hard to really understand. Now, GE apparently takes its stuff down to Cayman Island, and another group of them do that. The ethics is hard to live by.
What's a pure company? Yeah, no, I think you're definitely right. They, GE focuses on all their great environmental stuff that they're promoting and telling us about, but then what about the horrible subprime mortgages that their financial company does?
I didn't even bring it up. It's very, very difficult.
No, I agree. I definitely agree. No?
One of the reasons I invest in Microplace is that I have this sense of that we are all one, and that we need to be aware that people in other countries are not at our level of enoughness. And so by investing in Microplace, even though it's a tiny investment, but I feel I'm contributing to something that allows other people to meet their basic needs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Are you doing some kind of microfinance?
Yeah.
Perhaps? Yep. So there are, this is kind of hard to see. There are a lot of things that are really starting to get this impact social mission, new term, investing really going in the last decade or so. And this issue of investor outlook is really important. And since the economic crisis and the recession, I think even more so. So folks are now questioning, what are capital markets supposed to do? And particularly when you look at the last decade, we're exactly where we were 10 years ago, so we haven't made anything. What does that mean for what a market rate of financial return really is? This huge volatility every time you open the paper or listen to the news about the stock market. It's like, well, it's up 3% today and tomorrow it's going to be down, so it's going crazy. And I think it's really getting folks to rethink, do we follow this theory about our investment portfolio that we have, X in public equities and stocks and bonds and whatever our portfolio looks like to be diversified, or do we need to think about different instruments in our portfolio? And this issue and desire to align your investments with your values. This idea of increased awareness and credibility. Again, I've been doing this for a long, long time. Only in this last year have I seen anything in the Wall Street Journal about it. There's occasionally an article in the New York Times. But now there have been a couple in Forbes. There's been one or two in The Economist. In fact, there's an Economist reporter who follows this industry. So there's definitely, it's coming to the front, although not as much as I would certainly like. We're starting to get a track record. And there are certain things, like you invested in microfinance. I think, that started off decades ago where people were just putting grant money in that they never expected to get back. And then maybe they were lending money to these microfinance organizations and they'd get a, 2, 3, 5% return. But now the industry has grown so large and so sophisticated that big, fancy hedge funds and equity investors are putting money into these microfinance organizations and getting double-digit financial returns. And then the question is, have they pushed the industry too far and they're not achieving the missions that they started out with? But the idea that people are seeing a track record, they're seeing some things, so now perhaps it's getting them willing to consider others. there's been a lot of work on developing metrics. How do you measure and standardize? How do I compare a loan to a microfinance organization in India with a loan to an affordable housing developer in Baltimore? What's their relative value socially? And how do you make those decisions? There's starting to be lots of new investment products for folks, typically on that proactive side. So it's much harder for individuals like us, who I'm assuming most of us in this room are non-accredited investors, are making smaller investments. So that's where we have to work to get more products so that you and I can go online, like MicroVest, and place smaller investments. And then just kind of all this field building work. There are now organizations, there are a number of platforms, web-based platforms, that are trying to connect investors like us with organizations, socially driven organizations that need capital. So I'm going to stop on this slide, but and it's funny because a number of these things actually contradict with the slide ahead, like lack of awareness and acceptance. So it's starting to get out there, but it's still not really. And the folks who are making the financial decisions, the financial advisors, or folks that are on the board of trustees of foundations or pension funds, still might not have heard of it. They may think that every social investment, like we started off the conversation, is below market. And why do that if we're trying to maximize our financial return? So I think we have a lot of educating to do. And then how do we do it? Again, it's typically private, not public. It's not standardized. How do I find them? If you don't have a network, or if you're not of that world, it's hard to find. You have to rely on someone else. And then a big question as we think about the growth of this field is are there enough organizations and companies out there to absorb billions and billions of dollars of this kind of investing? So it's an exciting time with lots of open questions. It's exciting to see some of the new wealth folks, the eBay founders or president, Bill Gates, Starbucks. Yeah, I've got to love what Schultz is saying these days. I think that's awesome. And buy your bracelet at Starbucks because your money goes to a CDFI that finances companies that create jobs. But Gates set aside $400 million last year to do this kind of investing. The founder of eBay has his private investment company looking, everything they do, they want to have it be social. And a lot of foundations and large pots of money are starting to do that, setting a goal. We want 5, 10, 20, 50. Many are saying we want all of our money invested socially. And so it's a really, really exciting time, and we just have to figure out how to make it accessible for all of us.
If you're not a Lutheran, how do you, and you want to talk to your financial advisor, like how do you do that?
If you have a financial advisor.
All these notes, but then what do you say and how do you convince them?
That's a whole nother conversation. I think it's really, yeah, you might have to change it. Well, yeah, you might. There was a survey a couple years ago of financial advisors. Most professed to know nothing about this kind of investing, but they also said a lot of their clients are asking for it and it's not going to go away. So some of them are starting to develop expertise. Some of them are partnering with other firms that have the knowledge. Sometimes you will have to go to another advisor, and I heard a pension fund that did that. Or perhaps you could be lucky and you have someone who's receptive to it or who's been thinking about it already. I would go, and there's a couple slides in the back that have all sorts of resources, and the Social Investment Forum is probably the source of information on most of the retail products. And so we'll make sure that you have these slides. Can I just finish with 2 really quick examples? Thank you. Because we've kind of been talking in concept, and I want to give you some live examples. So these are two investments in my former portfolio at the Casey Foundation. Coastal Enterprise Inc. is a community development financial institution up in Maine. So they lend to projects and organizations that create community supportive projects, housing, community facilities. They also invest in companies that create jobs in their communities. They're really, while they work all over the state, they're really focused on the rim counties, which are very poor, away from the water and all the tourists. And this is one of their investments. The Health Access Network was a company, they had a bunch of little offices kind of scattered throughout this region, and they were small, and they didn't have all, if you wanted to get your teeth cleaned, you had to go 50 miles this way, but if you wanted to get your kid checked up by a pediatrician, you had to go 27 miles that way. And so this loan to this organization helped them consolidate, build a new, beautiful green building, offer additional services and longer hours to serve more people. On this particular investment, I don't know what they charge to the company. I got a 3% return on that. Bay Area Equity Fund. Oh, and Coastal, you can invest directly in them. Many CDFIs, almost all CDFIs have individual investors. The minimum is usually $1,000. Bay Area Equity Fund, this is for accredited investors. So this is, us retail folks can't access it. This is a private equity fund, so they're investing in private companies that haven't had an IPO. This particular fund was focused in the Bay Area and 26 or 28 specific low and moderate income communities. And they wanted to invest in companies either that were located or that hired folks from the neighborhoods. We had a 10-year goal, a 10-year life of the fund. San Francisco Bay, sorry, yes. Of creating 1,500 new jobs. They were really on the front end of this whole idea of clean energy. And this is one of their portfolio companies. I don't know if any of you are motorheads, but this is Tesla Motors, which is an electric car company. And I don't know if you can't really tell from this far away, but that is the governor there in the passenger seat who owns one of these, along with George Clooney and all the celebrities that have an interest in the environment. And I'll tell you, this was kind of contentious. I mean, we didn't have the choice of going in or not because we were in a bigger fund. But when I presented this to the foundation staff, like, why are we investing in this? This is a $100,000 car. It has, the kids and families we care about aren't going to benefit from this. We shouldn't be doing that. I said, well, yeah, they're $100,000 cars, but they're clean. But we don't have an environmental focus. But they're also manufacturing in the U.S. And they're taking over an abandoned Toyota manufacturing plant in California, and they're going to have 400 employees in there. And that's why we invested. And I will tell you, this fund has been crazy amazing, both on the jobs that those companies have created, but also on the financial return, which is in the top, probably the top decile of any kind of fund like this, fund not social or social, with probably up to 23, 25, 27% return on this investment. Yeah. They're not all going to be like this, but they intentionally said we're going to achieve market rates of return and we're going to create jobs. So it can be done.
Is that an accessible fund?
This is not. You have to be an accredited investor, which is income of, $300,000 or $400,000 a year and net worth of $1 million or $1.5 million. So it's harder to get into these if you're not. But I think a lot of folks are trying to think of ways that we can aggregate smaller amounts of capital from the retail market to get placed in things like this. So there's more to come, but those are just my examples. Sorry I went over.
Thank you.
Don't let me forget.